I just want to make sure. Perfect. I just wanted to confirm that we are recording. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar. This is a joint webinar co-hosted by the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, the Ontario chapter specifically, the Ontario Medical Association, Green is Health Medical Interest Group, and the Ontario Medical Association, as well as Peach Health Ontario. My name is Dr. Bargava, and I'm joined here by co-hosts and colleagues, Dr. Millie Roy, Dr. Miles Sargent, Max Silverman, and our OMA helper, Ankita Aurora here. And we are also joined by our distinguished guest, Senator Rosa Galvez, who we will introduce in a moment. I just wanted to proceed with a brief land acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm currently from Ottawa, and some of us are from, different areas of Ontario right now. So I'll proceed to do a land acknowledgement for the city of Ottawa, but would invite everyone to take a moment to reflect on the land that they are from today and that they are living on. So the city of Ottawa is built on the unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. We would like to acknowledge that Indigenous peoples are the original stewards of this land and have respected and celebrated the connection between Mother Earth and human health from time immemorial. And I'd like to add an additional comment that as medical people and educators and leaders, that we commit to educating ourselves on Indigenous perspectives and ways of knowing as we move throughout our practice of medicine and our policy work. So without further ado, I will invite our next speaker up and we'll proceed with the talk. So thank you everyone for joining us, and a huge welcome to our guest and Dr. Rosa Galvez.
Yeah, sorry, we just have a couple more things here, Sejal. So just some opening remarks. So I'm Dr. Millie Roy, as you heard, with the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto. I serve along with Sejal as co-chair of CAPE. And thank you to everybody for joining us today for an incredible hour ahead of thought-provoking discussion. We'll be hearing from Senator Galvez on the very important topic of climate-aligned finance. She is a thought leader in the field who has been innovating bold, impactful action from the very highest levels. I recall hearing her speak a few years ago on the power of consistently and persistently acting on long-term issues through Senate without being subject to the ups and downs of election cycles, cutting short a work in progress. And this was a perspective I had never considered before and has stayed with me as Senator Galvez has indeed continued to be a consistent collaborator with CAPE. Before we delve into other details, let's reflect for a moment on the underlying issues that bring us together tonight. We're undeniably in the midst of a climate crisis. This summer, our planet experienced the hottest global temperatures in recorded human history, triggering the worst wildfires in Canadian history. Millions of Canadians breathed the acrid smell of toxic wildfire smoke, and we saw the apocalyptic orange glow of wildfires reflected in our skies, while hundreds of thousands were evacuated, often Indigenous communities. And despite this, the machinery of the oil and gas industry has continued not only unimpeded, but in fact raking in record-breaking profits. We seem to live in a world where money drives action and is tightly tied to power, where monetary and corporate profit increasingly seem to override public interest, where the global fossil fuel industry that is rapidly making our world unsurvivable receives $11.2 million in subsidies every single minute of every day, while spending billions to subvert climate action. And we live in a complex and often bewildering system of money flowing between people, governments, corporations, and our financial institutions, a system which funds the climate crisis, but could instead be funding the solutions. And unfortunately, Canada is an international leader in fossil fuel financing and a laggard when it comes to clean energy financing. But we're also very fortunate to be living at a moment when the clean energy solutions we need not only exist, but recently became cheaper than fossil fuels. And although the barriers to implementing these solutions are powerful and political and so entrenched, they're also increasingly artificial in the face of obvious ecosystems disruptions. And that, in my mind, creates an opportunity to affect change. So if we understood the system better as advocates, we could better focus our resources and power to push the most effective levers to achieve the outcomes we're looking for. So let's hear from Senator Galvez to understand more about climate-aligned finance and how we can best align our own advocacy work to work collaboratively towards such a system. I'll turn it over to my colleague Max, co-chair at Green is Health, to introduce Senator Galvez, and then we'll go on to her talk. Thank you so much, Max.
Thanks so much, Millie, and thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight for our second joint webinar. I'd like to now share a very brief introduction for our incredible guest, Senator Rosa Galvez. Senator Galvez, originally from Peru, is one of Canada's leading experts in pollution control and its effects on human health. She has a PhD in environmental engineering from McGill University and was a professor at Laval University for over 25 years, heading the Civil and Water Engineering Department from 2010 to 2016. Her areas of expertise include sustainable development, water and soil decontamination, and environmental impact assessments, to name a few. Throughout her career, she's offered expert advice to various high-impact organizations, including the support of international agreements regarding protection of the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River. One of Senator Galvez's hallmark research achievements includes her work studying the catastrophic oil spill at Lac Mégantic, and she continues to carry out important environment-related research work today. She was appointed to the Senate in 2016, representing the Bedford, Quebec region. She's currently the chair of the Standing Senate Committee on Energy, the Environment, and Natural Resources. She's also served on the Standing Senate Committee on Transport and Communication and the Special Committee on the Arctic. Since her appointment, she has published several important policy papers, including recently the white paper, Aligning Canadian Finance with Climate Commitments, in March of 2022, which has led to the introduction of Bill S-243, the Climate Aligned Finance Act, a key piece of legislation that will help guide Canada's financial sector in its transition to a net zero economy. So without further ado, we are very excited to hear from Senator Rosa Galvez.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And you know, there is another title that is my favorite one, is Mommy. I am grandmother of 3 beautiful children, and there is no decision that I take without having them in mind. So I'm going to go ahead with my presentation, and if there is any problem, please stop me, and if there is any technical issue, I mean. So you know, for very long, we put the environment against the economy as like these are two opposite things that cannot live together, and that if the environment is good, the economies go bad, and vice versa. We know, when we understand that it's a complex problem, but we must repair this problem. And we know that we have the issues with, in some places of the planet, with overpopulation, overconsumption. I think, speaking to doctors, you are aware of some hoarding disorders that are really increasing, some health disorder due to this overconsumption, and this is not only in terms of material things, but it's also in terms of wasting and energy wasting. We think, some people, and I think that engineers try to think that technology is the solution for everything, in this respect of all the social problems and social issues that may also contribute to the problem. But mainly it's because our economy, which is linear, it doesn't fit in our finite planet, and infinite growth, it cannot work in a finite planet. And so we need to look into this, and the solutions that we need to find requires a change in paradigm. And we have to move from studying things in silo to a more holistic approach of first global understanding these networks and these influence and compounding factors, and start bringing back and create new values in society. And maybe we have been focusing too much in competitions, and it's the time now to focus on cooperation, solidarity, and change for different programs. Instead of a linear economy, should be maybe a circular economy, and instead of one single person health, we should think about the health of the planet. So I am sad to say that today we see society in terms of a market, and we are called consumers. I don't like that word, being called consumers. Some people will argue that no, we should keep calling ourselves consumers. But is this overconsumption and this is predatory capitalism that has taken us to this incredible increase in the way we use our natural resources? So per person and per person, we have been increasing the amount of natural resources that we take from nature with over our lifetime. And there are some terrifying statistics that says that 70% of what we take from Earth as a resource end up in a landfill, end up in greenhouse gas emissions, end up as microplastic in the oceans. And so we are a very wasteful society, and we really need to repair this system. We take, we make, and we use, and we dispose very, very fast. The lifetime of some products is some minutes to some days. And in the past, I'm sure you know, our parents and grandparents used to have one refrigerator for their whole married life of 30, 40 years, 60 years. And today, you know, we replace things very, very quickly. So this has bring deprivation, degradation of our environment, but also it has brought inequality. And corporations call pollution externality, and it's time that they start internalizing these externalities. So I follow the World Economic Forum because every year they will show us what are the global risks. And it's interesting to see that in the last 10 years, the environmental risks are gaining so much preponderance and importance. And also why I like following this is because they show us how this thing works, what is these domino effects, and how things such as, for example, tax evasion or tax avoidance impacts on the municipal or provincial or federal imbalances and lack of revenue, and how these weakens the democratic institutions, and then at the end results in the instability of our economy and the financial systems, and there is lack of ethics, and then there is, you know, lack of follow-up in the governance and in the monitoring of pollution, for example, and then, you know, then we create the climate change problem, and then all of these represent an obstacle to a clean environment. So one of the solution approach, I said, well, is to see these interactions and these networks and reverse the domino effect and have a more holistic view of what we are experiencing. Probably you have heard about the planetary boundaries. You know, is the model that explains that our planet Earth functions and makes it hospitable for humans because there is 9 mechanisms, 9 processes that makes life in Earth possible as we know it, and in harmony with our environment. And some of these processes are now being disrupted. And I remember when they were saying one of these processes disrupted, you know, the issue with the ozone layer. Now they are saying, well, we have disrupted the biochemical flows, and I am very aware of this one because I was studying the quality of water, and eutrophication is a terrible problems that end up in cyanobacteria and end up in health problems, and this is because we have disrupted the cycle of phosphorus and nitrogen. And we have ocean acidification, and we have contamination on the in the air, in the water, in the soil. And so these systems are now being disrupted. And unfortunately, recently, scientists have said that, well, it's not only 4, now we are in 6 of the 9 process that has reached very significant tipping points, which is very dangerous for us and for the ecosystems. And this is actually not only the scientists saying that. Very early in the year, I heard Secretary Guterres from United Nations saying that 2023 show us that climate breakdown has begun, and so if we don't accelerate the pace of cleaning up our act, our socioeconomic act in this planet, we are going to be in a very, very bad situation economically, in health, and in the way that society has lived today. We won't have this, and this is sad for future generations to come. But there are solutions, and there's also scientists that are saying, there are solutions available, and I will tell you more about them. But I follow Raworld scientist that talks about the donut economy and says, that wherever you are in the world, there is there is this basic needs in society to have access to health, to have access to food, to have access to democracy, to have access to education. And this is the floor, this is the basic. But we live in a planet that has these planetary boundaries, and therefore we cannot exceed or disrupt these systems that makes life possible in Earth, and these represent the ecological ceiling. But the space between this floor and this ceiling is enough where humans can thrive, and our socioeconomic model should fit into this donut. And so we need to go back to this safe space in which we can thrive. And because the economic model is a creation of our society, I think that it is possible to think that we can deconstruct and construct a new model that it's aligns with the conditions of our planet. So overshooting, we want to eliminate overshooting. I remember in years 70 when we started talking about overshooting day, which is the day at which we have a nation has exhausted the resources of 1 year. I remember in 76, more or less, for Canada, overshooting day was the 27th of December. In 2023, the overshooting day for Canada is the 3rd week of March. So we are living completely unsustainable, and we are exceeding, and we are using the resources much faster than what we should be using. And this is because our economic model supersedes the ecological reality, and this has to be redressed. Actually, and even when economists say, I think they say it, and people in finance, they say it, but I think that there is a disconnection between what they say and the reality of what they propose, and that their daily reality, because they will all agree that the 50% or more of the global GDP is based on natural resources and ecological services. So if we don't have a working ecology, and if we don't have natural resources, especially those ones that are not renewable, well, so our GDP is going to suffer. And so this is a disconnection and an incoherence that is very difficult to accept for scientists. And I like using mnemomatic terms in order to remind myself of very important things. And I think in terms of, for example, of 7 E's. And we are in this earth ecosystem that sustain our society and sustain economy. And we need to shift to this circular economy, more sustainable development. And for that, we need to shift to renewable energy and ecosystem protection and create by education new forms of employment, E. And for that, we need to really bring these new ethical values, including the respect of traditional knowledge, protecting the vulnerable population, think about future generation. And all of that is equivalent to say that we need a new social contract. If I just take one of the planetary system, which is the one that concerns the climate, and I talk about this for a few minutes. So the scientists initially called it global warming, but then the lobbying came, the oil and gas lobbying came, and we shifted it to climate change, which is, it can mean many things, but it doesn't reflect what is exactly what is happening, which is that there is a greenhouse effect that is warming the planet, the surface, the land, the oceans, creating humidity and making it and disrupting the stability of the atmosphere. And some people like to take a picture in order to say, well, you know, if China does this effort because they are the one that are putting more greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, others say, well, yeah, you say is the emerging economy, is India, is China, is Brazil, and they see it as a picture. But actually, we cannot think in terms of a picture because it's a film, it's a story, it started a long time ago, and these greenhouse gases stay in the atmosphere. Someone's very short, someone's longer, but they have been inputting and accumulating in the atmosphere. And there are direct relationship with our habits, our culture, the way we live, the way we consume, and the way we waste. So there is important correlations between the CO2 emissions or equivalent CO2 emissions and the per capita, the people, the way they consume. And for example, you know, we can say that Canada, we are very few people, but when we compare it with the way the Scandinavian countries produce per capita, then we are very high. And also it is reflected with the GDP. So we know that in the global north, we produce more greenhouse gas emissions than in the global south. But it is the global south that is experiencing dramatically the effects of the climate change. We just have to remember what happened to Pakistan, what happened in India, what happened in the island nations, to understand that they are not adapted, they are not prepared, and they have contributed very little to the problem. And so this fair share, it's a very important discussion point during the negotiations about how to deal with climate change or global warming. But we're in Canada, and also, despite that we are a developed country, we are, as introductory notes were given, they talk about that climate change is here in Canada, and that we are warming in the meridional Canada 2 times faster, and in the Arctic, some people says 3 times. There is some parts in when they say 5 times faster. And so, and this is translated in extreme weather events that come and causes great devastation. So we have these extreme weather events that produces health impacts, economic cost, and increase again inequality. And the Bureau of Insured Losses, which produces every year how much of these losses has been due to extreme weather event, whether they are the forest fires or floods or hurricanes or tornadoes, they are costing in the billions now. But these insurance losses is less than the half of the total cost. And also what is not reflected in this is that the communities and the communities that experience an extreme weather event, their vulnerability has increased. Another thing that is not said is that when these extreme weather events destroy basic infrastructure, transport infrastructure, building infrastructure, hospitals, or all these basic aqueducts or water, wastewater, electricity, and actually all these infrastructure are linear. And so there is again this domino effect that when one of them fails, many of the others will fail too. But what this cost doesn't reflect is that first, that the government doesn't have a bucket where to pick for compensating for this cost. So every year we are living in danger. The other thing is that many of these infrastructures that are destroyed, they are not completely paid. And insurance, more and more, are having difficulty to pay. And municipalities will have to burn the cost of the reconstruction without having finished paying the initial infrastructure. So again, these are compounding factors that increases, and we are saying that now the cost, this of climate is 16 millions by the hour, and every year that we don't act, it just increases more the cost. So it's not the cost of action that should worry us, it is the unaffordable cost of inaction that should really worry all of us. So in Canada, we have weak objective. We haven't met any of our targets, and this is very sad. And more, because we don't report all our emissions. What we report is scope 1 and scope 2, which is the upstream. I made a mistake. Downstream. Should read downstream in my slides. Is that there are the scope 3, there are the downstream emissions that are not counted, and that increases all our emissions. But moreover, as we just said about wildfires and the record wildfires that happen, and about wildfires, what we can say is that even though the number still remain more or less the same, the surface that has been burned, it is the size of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia together. And the temperature, it has raised the fires, it has never been seen. And so the firefighters and the organizations that deal with these wildfires, and they have a category, and so categories 1, 2, and 3, they will try to stop the fire. But with this category that we are experiencing, 3, 4, and 5, the order is you don't touch that. You just let it burn because it's too dangerous. And what you just focus is on bringing people to safe places. So this is going to have a very deep economic impact. And I am very happy that Climate Action Tracker that goes and do cards for every country has done one for Canada. And it explains that even as G7 country that has not succeed and decoupling growth from greenhouse gas emissions is at a high risk. Our banks continue to invest in fossil fuels. There is problems on conflict of interest because our financial sector that is composed by insurance, by pension plans, and by the banks, their boards have the same people sitting in the same in various boards, and so the decisions that they take are always filled with conflict of interest. Because if you sit in the board of a fossil fuel company, you will have as a fiduciary duty, your understanding of your fiduciary duty is to bring as much as benefits and returns to the shareholders. in the short term. But if you are sitting at the same time in a pension plan, your fiduciary duty should tell you that you have to think more in a medium term and long term, because you are thinking in the workers that are going to take their retirement in 30 years, in 20 years, and not in the short term. So, and the same thing for the people that sit in the insurance. So it is really very, very interesting, this issue of double materiality with respect to the actors in the financial sector. So what happened is the following. So the financial sector and their actors, on one hand, they will acknowledge that the risk of these extreme weather events, the risk of the transition to a low carbon economy, the risk of legislation pushing for this transition. And they will say that, yes, this is physical risk, this is transitional risk, and they will ask the government, to do something about it. But at the same time, these same actors turn completely 180 degrees, and then they will finance and fuel, and they call it finance emissions. They will keep fueling the climate crisis. So this double materiality cannot be, it's not sustainable, it's incoherent. And another thing that I can tell you is, while a lot of this investment has happened by some pension plans, by some teachers' pension plans, or some universities, for every dollar from the disinvestment movement, our banks have filled up the gap. So again, this is very sad situation, and that's why we in Canada, we are laggers in financial climate finance and climate finance, because ahead, the US and the European Union are much ahead with respect to these issues of double materiality and to climate risk, and that they are putting regulations, and we are behind. And the problem is that our economy is intrinsically related to that of the United States. And because we are lagging, very soon we are going to feel also the struggles of disrupting our economy that is related with the states, because the states are ahead with the regulations of the climate. They have passed very, very important bills like the Jobs Act bill, for just transition. They call it in a different way, but it's just transition. And then recently, the Inflation Reduction Act, where they injected trillions into shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy. So we have to worry. The sustainability revolution is here, and it is organic because everywhere else is going from top to bottom and from bottom to top. We have lived other industrial innovation cycles, so I don't understand why we are scared of that. One important question that we ask here is why, if Canada, having the longest coastline, having in some areas the highest tides in the world, in areas where the waves are very high, how is it that we don't have one single project on maritime tidal energy? This is very important. So we need to identify and to move in forms of modernization that are sustainable. And I talk about circular economy, but we have zero waste. I sponsor for the government the Net Zero 2050, dematerialization, net positive nature, one planet, one health. But we need to move faster. It is the time to decarbonize. Science has been very clear about the causes. Engineers, we have delivered cheap, safe, clean, sustainable technology. Public opinion. I'm talking to you doctors, but I have talked to religious people. I have talked to nurses. I have talked to students. And the polls are saying 60% and plus, and in some areas like in Quebec, it's like 75%. We are for a higher action in climate. There is an opportunity because, Who doesn't want to be independent, energy independent? Who doesn't want? The fossil fuels is dependent on geopolitics, it's dirty, it's not safe. There is a lot of workers that suffer in this industry. And even their workers have told me that they want so much to find jobs in the clean energy. So there is opportunity, and the cost of inaction, as I said, is growing. So what is missing? We have this climate accountability, net zero 2050, but it doesn't tell us how to get there. It just tells us we have to get there, but it doesn't tell us why. And so I find out that is the catalyzer that is missing is the financial sector, which is not doing the job of putting the flows of cash that should go into renewable energy and electrification and social impact projects, and they should come out from the fossil fuels. Also, why? It's because when you see the fossil fuels and you learn that they receive so much subsidies, and that the investments and the loans that they receive are based on the oil that is in the ground and not in their production, you wonder why these banks are risking so much. And one of the reasons is because this conflict of interest and this need to make benefits at the short term. So I published several white papers. One, we call it Recovering from the COVID Pandemic, what is a clean and just economical stimulus, where we identify several areas in which the government should act, and they did act. And this is what I find that there is a lot of hope, is because from my personal experience is that when we poke the bear and when we push and we push and we push and we present data and we are logical and we present that it's not only the environment but also for the economy, the government usually acts and supports. So I was happy to see that some of the ideas that I put in this white paper on building forward better were put in the 2022 budget. And so pushing on this thing is aligning the financial sector with our climate commitments. So we are signatories of the Paris Agreement. We are signatories of United Nations Convention for Climate Change, and we have passed a bill, Net Zero 2050. So these are our commitments. And so now we know to take by the hand the financial sector and tell them that enough and stop with this double materiality, enough and stop with this conflict of interest, enough and stop with this not putting the right amount of insurance money for the extreme weather events that are going to happen, and really align with our commitments. So my bill, which is S243, tries to avoid lock-in, meaning we have to phase out fossil fuels. We want detailed plans on how the sector and the people to who they provide their services. So the financial sector provide with 3 types of services: the lending, the investing, and the counseling. And so these 3 services, the financial sector, whether they are pension plans, whether they are banks, whether they are insurance, that they provide, these services must be aligned with our climate commitments. Because of this risk, they cannot just say, okay, I'm taking this risk, but I'm not having money put aside. I tell you that the government doesn't have money for the extreme weather event cost. Well, they have to change that. And the banks and the insurance and the pension plan also, they have to start changing that. And they call it capital requirements, but in reality is this bucket of money that they have to put aside in the case that the extreme weather events or other unexpected risks, as they call it, materialize. Respect the indigenous people and, of course, many other environmental and social goals. Again, conflict of interest, and recognize that climate change is a superseding interest that is relevant to directors' duties. In fact, I won't go through all of this. you can read it in my white paper and in the bill. But what I can say about superseding duty is that in court, when some corporation has brought and say, my duty is just to bring returns in money to my shareholders, the courts around the world have said no. What we say is benefits to the shareholders. And the benefits include social, environmental, and all other benefits. It's not just money in return, because it's stability, it's security, it's safety that is included in the benefits. So with that, I will conclude my presentation. And again, you can have access to my white papers and to the text of the bill, but the bill reflects all what I have been discussing and trying to redress the problems that I mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Galvez. That was fantastic. We now would love to open it up to our audience. If anyone has any questions they'd like to share, we encourage you to add them to the chat and we can read them out for you. I'm not sure, Ankita, in this sort of webinar setting, are they able to unmute and speak, or will I be reading them?
They should have mic access. We also have a Q&A option open that you are free to use. So whatever folks prefer, we have a few different options.
Okay, so I see Richard has raised his hand. So if you'd like to unmute and ask a question, go ahead.
Richard, you can go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just have a question. Like, for instance, the Ottawa Hospital, they're doing an expansion, a major expansion, where they're planning to use natural gas as their source of energy. And I'm just wondering, what source of financing would there be to give them incentive to use renewables as opposed to using natural gas? Because right now they're very stuck on using natural gas as their source of energy for a major expansion.
Thank you so much for the question. Yes. So I don't know if you have heard about the taxonomy. A taxonomy is a classification system that will tell you, okay, what technologies are green, what is acceptable as a transition. And unfortunately, in Canada, we have even a third category. In Europe, taxonomy is green taxonomy. So they have said you cannot use coal, oil, or gas. And so that forces everybody to, by many means, look into renewable energy. Unfortunately, in Canada, this process of developing the taxonomy is very interesting because it has reached a wall, a cul-de-sac. And why is that? It's because they brought people from the oil and gas. So they want to be there. And so we don't have in Canada yet a taxonomy. What we have in Canada is some funds for green energy. And I hear that depending on the type of project, it is easy to access and sometimes it's difficult to access. But there are some funds for green growth, and I'm sure that municipalities are aware and the provinces are aware, because for a project to go ahead, it needs to be multiple partners. So municipal, provincial, and federal. The federal won't cover everything, but there is this possibility, the green fund.
Well, some of that could come from federal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. We have another question from an attendee that I'll read out. Asks, where is the Climate Aligned Finance Act now in terms of being discussed in the Senate? And what do you think are the odds that it will be passed?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So to tell you the truth and be honest, when I tabled the bill, I really just wanted to start the debate. because nobody was talking about it. It was like a taboo. We couldn't talk about the double materiality. We couldn't talk about this, the risk growing and compounding, and the financial sector will, deny all of this. So my first objective was just to start talking about it, and that objective has been reached. Then after was to, try to convince them to bring it to a committee and study it in committee. And there is resistance. There is resistance. Of course, there is resistance, and it's sad because the danger and the risk is growing, as I said, and the costs are growing, and we seem not to have a plan. So I'm very happy to say that my bill is in committee, and it's going to be studied, and I have been received a date, which is that 20-something of November. It's in the banking committee, and if you can write to your senator, and or if you can write to the chair, it will be important because in the other place of the elected people, the MPs, I have a lot of support. And so they even wrote a motion 84, to ask that the government advances in sustainable finances and use my bill as an example. So they are waiting for the bill. But in the Senate, it has to pass through the committee, the banking committee, and we hope that there is going to be a nice debate, and that if there is going to be amendments, well, there is amendments, but because the other chamber is asking, and the other chamber is the elected chamber, I think that the senators must tell to themselves, like they say always, is that we have to defer to the elected chamber. So normally, if we are logical with our principles in the Senate, we should send my bill to the other chamber.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Galvez. And I had a question from myself to really relate to our entire group. So most of us who've tuned in here today are in the healthcare sector. We are used to advocating in the planetary health space and making the connection between environment and health. Do you have suggestions for us to now extend that connection to climate-aligned finance? How should we connect our work, and sort of achieve that triple bottom line where we're talking about, finance, health, and climate?
Absolutely. Well, the first question was about that, no? So you have hospitals and that are using non-renewable energy, and that they have to shift to be net zero by 2050. And so for that, they need the financial assistance. My bill orders every federally regulated entity, financial entity, to align with their climate commitments. And to do that, they have to talk to the clients, a hospital or a municipality or anybody that needs capital or investment or advice. They have to align with the climate commitments. So the other thing, and the other important thing, is that if we progress with this decarbonization in every sector, that will have positive impacts on the health of people and on the health of the ecosystem. And so in the bill, we talk about any construction, any project of any kind, they should have in mind these climate commitments, but they also have to have this detailed plan based on science targets and on existing technology. And so that will push for innovation and technology. I tell to people, because not many knows, that the inventor of the solar panel is a Canadian. So what happened? Where did we lose that innovation? And the same thing can be said for many other things. So we have to progress at different fronts, but always having in mind sustainability, decarbonization, and the health of the planet. And I think that because we are putting the, how can I say, the guides, these decisions, when we decide to do something, it should be done in the right way. For example, another little example, we are living right now housing affordability crisis, no? And they are saying that young people cannot afford a house. And so they are saying that we have to give permission and permits for big dwellings, big buildings very fast. Yes, but I was talking today in the National Finance and in the Banking Committee today about the fact that, okay, you want to go in a hurry and you want to construct, but the fact is that in Canada, we live very close to water bodies. And we know that now in the center of downtown, there is heat domes that causes pollution, that causes health problems, that there is mold because of the humidity. And so I said, you cannot just say, okay, let's just build the same way we are building. You have to build in an adapted way, you know, and in a cleaner way, and reflect to the points. Because why I say that is because one of our witness, which is a banker, said, we need to become more like Manhattan. That was his actual words. He says, we need to become like Manhattan. Every big city in Canada should become like Manhattan. Well, I said, well, Manhattan, you know, many times is underwater, and people suffer of many health problems. And if we don't mitigate, if we don't bring down the greenhouses, which is the pollution, we are not going to succeed adaptation. And even I fight a little bit with my engineer colleagues because they think the solution is to adapt. But I tell them, you can adapt to 0.5 and maybe 1 degree, but we are at 1.1. We are already at 1.1, and we are seeing all these extreme weather events destroying all these problems. How can you think that we are going to adapt to 1.3, 2.6? No. So we have to succeed in mitigation, especially us in the global north, in order to be able to succeed adaptation. So I hope I answer your question.
Yes, that was fantastic. Thanks so much. Given that we're trying to stay within the 9 o'clock time, I'll pass it off to Sejal for some closing remarks.
I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but the answers you gave were so fruitful and deep and really insightful. So thank you again, Senator Galvez, for such an insightful and informative talk. And inspiring was a word I saw in the questions, which I think is entirely appropriate. It's honestly, for me, and I'm sure others here, it's incredibly reassuring and motivating to hear a senator be such an expert and a champion for this cause. So thank you again for sharing your knowledge with us and for all that you do at the most upstream level of policy in Canada. And I'm sure that we all kind of took away our own points that further inspired and supported the work we do. But some of the points you mentioned that I think really resonated with me was, first, the weak objectives lead to weak efforts, which to me speaks to a lack of vision and planning, and also is a bit of a call to action for us at CAPE and Peach and the OMA to potentially be the ones to call for bolder targets and actions that center equity, divestment, and planetary health. And secondly, I think your comment that the cost of inaction should be more daunting than the cost of action was entirely appropriate as well. And I think as we move forward with our advocacy at CAPE on the clean energy regulations, I think utilizing this thought angle would be really, really helpful and actually really quite relevant. So thank you again for spending your evening with us, Senator Galvez, and thank you to our attendees and our co-hosts. This night would not have been such a success without you. And I just want to place a quick plug for CAPE and Peach. If you're based in Ontario, then we are two organizations who are involved with political climate advocacy, and we're always looking for more motivated individuals to be involved. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Millie. I'm sure Max as well would take interested individuals as well, and Miles and myself if you're interested in getting involved with our organizations or wanting just to learn more about what we do. So with that, I will close and maybe I'll open it up for any other comments from the other panelists here and the other moderators. But thank you again, Senator Galvez, for all you do and for your talk tonight. Okay, not hearing anything, so I think we'll close off the webinar
on behalf of all of our groups and all attendees. And I hope you'll be open to, you know, perhaps some of us approaching you, you know, to look for ways to collaborate going forward. And, you know, I think there's a lot that we could accomplish, you know, by aligning the healthcare sector with the work that you are doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and please be well and safe. And yes, my office is always open for collaboration. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.